Hello everyone, and yes, we finally get to see a game from the match, Liren versus Wei Yi. This is the 6th game of their match. The first 5 games were a fairly short draw, so we decided to skip those, but this one may or may not be a draw. So let's dive straight into it and see how Ding played his 22nd game of the required 30 games that are required for him to qualify to the FIDE Candidates Tournament. So here, Ding has the white pieces, and he opens with d4. We have knight to f6. We have c4, e6, g3 going for the Catalan opening, and now d5 striking in the center. We have bishop to g2 and bishop to e7. Knight to f3, Ding is now ready to castle, and both players now castle. So castles, castles, and the d captures on c4. This is basically a classical line of the Catalan. So queen to c2, Ding is now ready to reclaim his pawn. We have a6 preparing b5, and before grabbing the pawn, Ding stops b5. So he plays a4, bishop to d7, now getting ready to counter white's light square bishop here by playing bishop to c6. So queen captures on c4 and bishop to c6. Now this has all been played before, nothing new happening here. Bishop to g5 and now knight b to d7. We have rook to d1 and now a5. And here, queen to c1 is a known move in the position, but after knight b to d2 by Ding, it is now already as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So h6, asking what do you do with the bishop here? You can't really go to h4, and going backwards doesn't really look like it's doing anything. You could play bishop f4, bishop to e3, but Ding knows what he's doing, so he captures on f6. We have knight captures, and now rook a to c1, putting more pressure on this c7 pawn, so the bishop here cannot move. White is preparing knight to e5, so the bishops will get traded off, and then Ding will have some very nice pressure along the c file. So here we have queen to e8, now getting ready to defend here, but also just attacking that a4 pawn twice. So Ding first has to defend this, and only now rook to c8. So now the bishop can move, and the c7 pawn will be defended. Knight to e5, offering a trade of light square bishops, also grabbing that beautiful e5 square for his knight. Bishop captures on g2, king captures, and now, of course, we want to advance our pawn to c5. And the Wei Yi is doing perfectly fine here. Nothing wrong with his position whatsoever. So knight d2 f3, improving the position of that knight on d2, and bishop to d6 now. We have h4 by Ding, grabbing more space on the king side. C captures on d4, opening up an attack to the queen. Queen captures, and now rook captures on c1. Going for some trades here. Rook captures on c1 and queen to b8 now. Putting pressure on that e5 knight, also defending the bishop, and also making room for this rook to enter the game. So rook to c4 and rook to d8 now. And it seems like you are threatening some discoveries here, but in all fairness, there aren't any impressive discoveries. Like, sorry about that. Bishop to b4 could be one of the nicer ones, maybe getting a nice outpost for the bishop and getting grabbing hold of the open d file for your rook. But other than that, nothing really serious. So Ding just plays e4, could be very useful. The knight and bishop are on well, maybe unpleasant squares. So if e5 can be played, that should be great. And then now comes knight to e8. Like we said, bishop to b4 is a fine discovery, but it's not all that much. Let's say queen b2, we're going to play rook to c8. We could trade off a pair of rooks, and that should be good for Wei Yi. However, here he tries knight to e8, and now Ding grabs more space on the king side. We have h5, and now he goes back. Knight to f6, he goes after the h5 pawn, and this is where his troubles begin. Here, Ding plays queen b6. He says, all right, you can have your h5 pawn. I'm going to grab the a5 pawn. So this is what he does. Knight captures on h5, queen captures on a5. But now the problem is, if Ding moves his knight from the center of the board, let's say knight captures on f7, then we can pick up this knight on h5 for free. So here, Wei Yi brings it back. But now, feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute strongest move for Ding while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is again knight captures on f7, because now, yes, there is no knight on h5 that we can pick up, but the knight and bishop are perfectly aligned for this e5 push. So king captures on f7, now comes e5, attacking the bishop and the knight, and knight to d5 now. We're going to capture on d6, queen captures on d6, and now queen back to e1. And if you look at the position now, the material is completely even, but Ding's king is much safer. Wei Yi's king is already on f7, and it could be difficult defending it. So here he goes back, king to g8, now comes queen to e4. We have rook to e8, helping out with the defense of the pawn. As this is an isolated pawn, we're going to be able to attack it very easily. So b4, now a5, b5, a6 could create a pass pawn at some point. Knight to b6, attacking Ding's rook and the pawn on a4, and now rook to d4, attacking the queen. We have knight to d5, blocking again, hoping to get some sort of a draw by repetition, but just knight to e5. And here you can see how easily Ding is winning some very crucial squares. We have rook to f8, and now comes pawn to a5. We have rook to f5, putting pressure on the knight here, but now knight to d3. And here we have queen to e7 and knight to c5. Now putting again pressure on that e6 pawn, so king to f7, defending it. Now comes rook to d2. Here we have b6, attacking the a5 pawn, but also the knight here. And interestingly, here Ding is completely winning, and he plays a move that gives, well, maybe gives Wei Yi a bit too much space to recover his position. Here, after b6, rook captures on d5 is just game over, but it's not easy to spot. Of course, you can't capture with the pawn because the rook hangs, but if you capture with the rook, now we play a captures on b6. And yes, black is up the exchange, but we have a pass pawn here, and turns out that this pass pawn is unstoppable. Let's say rook d8, we're going to play queen f4 check. King to g8, we're going to play b7. You're never getting rid of this pawn because you're never getting rid of this knight from c5. So queen e8, we have to guard the queening square. But now queen to c7, and after something like king to h7, we're going to play b5. It's a critical move. Guards the c6 square, which will be important to prevent any checks. And now after any move, because we are just threatening to pick up the pawn and then, well, grab the rook here, even if e5, just knight e6, and that's it. We're threatening checkmate, we're threatening to pick up the rook. So once checkmate is stopped, we're going to win the rook, then we're going to promote our b pawn to a queen, and that's it. So very interesting that Ding did not go for this rook captures on d5, but he probably saw that the other plan was also very nice, so he played knight to d3, and now we have queen to b7, because here b captures on a5 is the only real way to go, somehow trying to stop that pass pawn, but even this would be very hard to hold. So instead, after knight to d3, queen to b7 was played, and now what do? Here, okay, knight to f4 check could be tricky, then you might lose the queen, but Ding, of course, plays rook to e2. Now the queen is nicely defended, and also you are threatening queen captures on e6. So rook to f6, defending that, and now a captures on b6. And here, queen to a8 was played, but it was also in this position on move 41 that Wei Yi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Instead of this queen to a8 move, you might think, okay, let's just capture the pawn and see what happens. The problem is knight e5 check, and after the king moves, we can play queen h7, and everything is just falling apart. The knight on e5 is too strong a piece, and there's no way for black to survive this. There's no way to defend the pawn. It's just a very ugly position. If you try something like this, then even this monster fork is possible. Knight to d7 check, forking absolutely everything. That would not be a good idea. So yeah, after this queen retreat to the a8 square, Wei resigned the game, and Ding Liren wins the game 6, and that also means that he wins the match. There will be no tie breaks, no Armageddon, and that means that he has fulfilled 22 games now of the required 30, and he still needs 8 more classical games in order to have enough classical games to be considered as a participant for the next FIDE candidates tournament. So I will keep you informed. We'll see what Ding does next, and we are gonna cover his presumable success, and well, we'll just take it from there. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for always suggesting the absolute best stuff. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Hunter, Lottie Lottie Luxus 40, and happy birthday JJG Yes to Dumplings. And I would also like to thank Zoran Krustic, Bitcoin Lightning Please, and Nagarjuna Ponugoti for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on Ding's progress and whatever you guys suggest in the comments and on the email and on social networks, and of course everything else that happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.